You've paid for a lot of things you don't actually own. The movies in your account, the games in your library, the books on your e-reader, the songs, the apps. You'd say you bought them, but you didn't. You're just renting, but you don't feel it yet because the payment cleared and nothing's gone wrong. There's a word for paying the same and getting less. When a company shrinks the bag of chips but keeps the price the same, that's shrinkflation. And you've probably experienced it before. What's happening to the word buy is its less obvious cousin, skimpflation. Same price, same buy button, but less of the thing you thought you were paying for. And the thing I want to discuss that's being skimped is ownership itself. It's the hardest kind of downgrade to notice, because the number on the price tag never moves. There's a Harvard Business School study that found exactly this. People are far more sensitive to a price going up than to the product getting smaller. The button said the same word, at the same price, so nobody looked deeper. Take Kingdom Hearts on the Nintendo Switch, for example. Anyone who bought it at full price a few years back now owns a game with an expiration date, June 9th, 2027. That's the day it stops working. Not stops updating, stops working, gone, and there's nothing those buyers can do about it, because it turns out they never really owned the thing in the first place. Understanding this is worth your time even if you've never touched a video game, because the company doing it this time, Square Enix, is handling it about as decently as a company can. There's a discount, your save data carries over, they did almost everything right, and it still ends with people owning nothing they thought they'd bought. This video isn't about a company behaving badly. We're talking about what's left of the word own when even the best possible outcome this could have had proves we were only ever renting. So let me back up and lay out exactly what happened. When Kingdom Hearts came to the original Switch in 2022, it came in a form most people didn't think twice about. The games weren't on the console. They were cloud versions, streamed from a server somewhere, the same way you'd stream a movie. The store even told you. Right there on the listing, in writing, it said cloud version. Nobody was tricked, and I'll come back to this in a few moments. There was one Kingdom Hearts game that ran natively on the Switch, a little rhythm spin-off called Melody of Memory, light enough to fit on the hardware. Every mainline collection, the ones people actually wanted, was cloud only, so the whole time the thing you were buying wasn't a game setting on your machine, it was permission to access the game on a server. On June 9th of 2026, Square Enix delisted these cloud versions and posted the schedule for shutting them down. The native re-releases, real ports running on the hardware this time, arrive October 8th, and the cloud versions stop working exactly 1 year after the announcement, June 9th, 2027. And here's the off-ramp, which I'm putting right up front because a fair version of this story has to. Otherwise, I'm just complaining. If you owned the cloud version, the native one costs you half price. Your saves transfer over, and you get a year of warning. Compared to how these things usually go, and we'll get into how they usually go, that's close to the best case version of a shutdown. Yet, it still ends with a game people paid full price for having a death date. Because when those servers go off in 2027, there's nothing left. No file on a cartridge, no install on a hard drive to limp along unpatched. You can't keep the version you had because you never had a version. You had a connection. And a connection is not a thing you own. It's a thing someone else agrees to keep providing right up until they don't. And if you go read the fine print, which nobody does, myself included, it's all sitting right there. Nintendo's user agreement says the software is licensed, not sold to you. Square Enix's own store says it in plainer words than I ever could. You are purchasing a license for a digital product. Not the product, a license to the product. The button said buy, the paperwork said borrow, on our terms for as long as we feel like it. So there's your answer. You never owned it. Now let's slow down and look at how this works, because this process is the part that turns a boring licensing footnote into a game with an expiration clock. Here's how cloud gaming works. The game doesn't run on your console. It runs on a powerful graphics server in a data center. And in Kingdom Hearts' case, that server is run by a company called Ubisoft. Your Switch downloads a small app, something like 40 megabytes, just enough to open a connection. When you press a button, your console sends that input to the server. The server runs the game, renders the frame, and streams the video and audio back down to your screen. You're functionally watching a very responsive video of a game being played on a computer you'll never see. Which is clever. It let a little 2017 handheld run a game it had no business running, but it means the entire thing you paid for lives on hardware you don't control. And when that hardware gets switched off, there is no copy to fall back on. A normal deleted download at least leaves a dead file on your drive. A cloud game leaves you with a 40 megabyte app that connects to nothing. And once you see that, you can actually rank how much you own any digital thing on a kind of sliding scale. At the very bottom, permanence 0, a cloud game like Kingdom Hearts. Functionally, nothing lives on your device. Server dies, game dies. One rung up from that, any software that's just a shell for a server. The app on your phone that's useless the second the company's servers go down. Above that, a subscription app that does install on your machine but phones home to check your license, and stops the moment that check fails. That's Adobe. The files are right there on your computer, but they can still lock you out. Higher still, a real perpetual buy-it-once program that runs with no check at all. That feels like ownership. But even that isn't the top, and there's a perfect example of why. Flappy Bird. Before we get to that, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also consider becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon to gain early access to my videos. Your support makes these videos possible. Thank you. Now, let's get back to it. Flappy Bird got pulled from the App Store back in 2014 by its own creator, and everyone who'd already downloaded it got to keep it. For a while, that was the internet's favorite fun fact. I remember devices with Flappy Bird on them selling for way too much money on eBay. You couldn't get it anymore, but you owned your copy. Except the game was built as a 32-bit app, and in 2017, Apple's iOS 11 dropped support for 32-bit apps entirely. The game was never updated, so one day it just stopped opening. The store couldn't reach your copy. The operating system could. You, quote, owned it, and it died anyway, because you never owned the platform it ran on, which leaves one rung at the very top. The only place ownership is really ownership. Something with no server, no license check, no platform that can turn it off. A DRM-free download, a ripped MP3, a game on a disc or a cartridge. That's it. That's the whole list, and be honest with yourself about how much of what you've bought this decade actually lives up there. For most of us, almost none of it. Even that top rung isn't as solid as it looks anymore. A lot of the discs on shelves right now are already hollow. You buy the physical game, you put it in, and it turns out the disc is barely a courtesy. The real game is a 50 gigabyte download that has to finish before you can play. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 released that way. The disc was functionally a coaster that unlocks a download. So, the day one patch did to your disc what the cloud did to Kingdom Hearts. It moved the actual game somewhere you don't control and left you holding the case. The top rung of the ladder still exists, it's just narrower than the case on the shelf makes it look. And here's the thing that made me want to get this video out now. That top rung, the physical disc, the one piece of this most people still trust, is being pulled up behind us. As I've been working on this video, Sony announced it will stop producing physical discs for all new PlayStation games starting in January 2028. Now, to be fair, that's new games. The discs you already own still work. The games already on disc aren't affected. Nobody's reaching into your shelf. But the escape hatch, buy it on a disc, keep the disc, own the thing, is closing for anything that comes out after that date. And the physical version they'll still sell at the store, early signs are it's a box with a download code inside, which is only a receipt, not a physical disc. And it's not just consumers uneasy about this. Hideo Kojima, the guy who makes PlayStation exclusives, said the move made him really sad and left him frightened for the future of ownership. So, permanence drops step by step as the thing you depend on slides out of your hands and into someone else's. First the server, then the licensed server, then the operating system itself, and soon, on at least one major platform, the disc doesn't get made in the first place. The Switch Cloud version of Kingdom Hearts just skips all the middle steps and starts at zero. Okay, so why now? Why is this happening in 2026 and not 5 years ago? As always, let's follow the money. Kingdom Hearts on the cloud was always a workaround. Kingdom Hearts was too heavy for the original Switch, so instead of building a real port, Square Enix rented servers and streamed it. That was the compromise. Then, in June of 2025, the Switch 2 launched with hardware finally powerful enough to run these games for real, natively, on the device. And when that became true, the sole reason for the cloud version evaporates. The workaround is obsolete. So look at what the shutdown actually accomplishes for them. It kills the ongoing cost of renting those Ubisoft servers. And it lets them resell the exact same catalog as shiny native ports on the new console. The 50% discount that felt like generosity, it's also the simplest possible way to move your old cloud purchase onto a new product they can sell again. I'm not saying that's evil. It's probably a sound business decision, and it seems the business decision and the we're doing right by our fans decision happens to be the same decision. And it's not a one-off, because the pressure runs deeper than one console cycle. To the corporate accountant and shareholders, a customer who has to keep paying is worth more than a customer who paid once. A license you can end, resell, or move on to next year's hardware is a better asset than a disc sitting on someone's shelf that you'll never make another dime on. So the drift from own to license isn't really a choice any single company makes and could just as easily unmake. To be fair, servers cost money. Real money. A lot of money. Every month, forever. Nobody can reasonably promise to run a GPU streaming farm until the heat death of the universe on the back of a one-time payment you made in 2022. To be fair, the cloud version was labeled a cloud version. You weren't lied to about what it was. To be fair, the outcome here is the thing fans actually wanted the whole time. Native ports that don't need a connection. If you played those cloud games with a weak internet connection, you've been begging for this native port for as long as the cloud versions were out. For most players, the end of the cloud era is an upgrade. Every bit of that defends the economics. None of it defends the buy button. Because the off-ramp, the discount, the save transfer, the year of warning, Square Enix didn't owe you any of that. Looking back at the license, it says they can end the service and owe you nothing. No refund, no credit, no compensation. They chose to be decent. It was grace, not obligation, and no company is required to give you grace. Which brings me to the next question. Has this happened before? Because if you think this is a Kingdom Hearts problem, or a Nintendo problem, or a video game problem, I need to show you the ladder of real-world cases this sits on. And it's been getting taller for about 15 years. Let's start in 2009. Amazon reached into people's Kindles overnight and deleted books they had paid for and downloaded. And of all the books it could have been, it was George Orwell. It was 1984. Now, to be accurate, the reason was boring. A seller had uploaded the Orwell books without the rights, so Amazon pulled them and refunded everyone. It wasn't censorship, the lesson wasn't Amazon is evil, the lesson was they can reach into a device you own and take back a thing you bought, and the only question is whether they decide to. Let's take it up a step to rung 2 of the ladder. In 2024, Ubisoft shut down the servers for a racing game called The Crew, and because the game needed those servers even to play alone, it just stopped working. Permanently, for everyone who bought it. No offline version, no fallback. And when players sued, Ubisoft's own lawyers said that players only ever had a limited license to access the game. Not to own it, to access it. And I want to pause on The Crew because it's one place in this story where people refused to accept the shutdown, and it's the closest thing to good news I've got. When a game dies like that, sometimes the players rebuild the servers themselves. When Sony killed the online servers for Little Big Planet, a fan group stood up a replacement called Project Lighthouse. When PlayStation Home shut down, fans brought it back as Destination Home. There's an emulated stand-in for the PlayStation 3 network called RPCN, keeping old games playable online years after Sony walked away. None of it is official, all of it is legally gray, and none of it undeletes what was lost. But it's proof of something the license would rather you not believe. There's nothing you can do is a choice the companies make. Sometimes the players disagree. Okay, rung 3, and this is the one I've been holding back since the first minute. This is happening right now, and it has nothing to do with games. While I was making this video, Sony sent a notice to people who had bought movies on the PlayStation Store. Not rented, bought. And the notice said that those movies are being deleted from their libraries on September 1st. 551 films and shows. Terminator 2, Total Recall, Rambo, The Deer Hunter. Movies people paid for years ago that just vanish. The reason Sony gave was licensing. The deal with the studio ended, so Sony lost the right to keep serving the films. This time, the notice mentioned no refund. People who never touched a Kingdom Hearts game, who never bought a console, who just bought a movie to keep, are getting the same exact lesson. Amazon had a rights problem to address. Ubisoft killed a server. Sony lost a license. Kingdom Hearts is a workaround being retired. 4 completely different reasons, one identical result. You paid for it, and then it was gone, and there was nothing you could do, because the fine print said all of this was allowed. And there's one more line in the fine print, and this one's about games, and it's about you. Sony's own terms say that if you don't use your account for 3 years, they can close it. And closing it means losing access to every digital game you ever bought with that account. The terms call it irreversible. They do send an email warning first and give you 6 months to log back in, so it isn't hidden. But the deal underneath is blunt. Disappear for long enough, and the whole library you paid for can be switched off. That language lives in the European terms, and it's not new. Some version of it has been sitting there since 2009. Nobody slipped it in this year, people just finally read it. And that tells us none of this is a law of nature. It's a choice. Microsoft's Xbox has almost the exact same inactivity rule, with one difference. Microsoft promises it won't delete an account that has digital purchases sitting in it. Same clause, opposite decision. One company reserved the right to revoke your library for not logging in. The other looked at the identical problem and said your purchases were off limits. The fine print didn't have to read the way Sony's does. Somebody chose that. So that's the ladder. It runs from they can reach into your device all the way down to there was never anything in your device to begin with. In Kingdom Hearts is the bottom rung, the purest version because there was never a game file to delete. And this isn't a conspiracy. It's simpler and more boring than that. The storefront says buy, the contract says license. Those two words mean different things, and the gap between them is where everything you think you own actually lives. You didn't buy a game, or a movie, or a book. You bought permission, and permission often expires. Now, the last question. Is anyone going to stop it? Over in Europe, a campaign called Stop Killing Games turned into a formal citizens initiative, and it collected almost 1.3 million verified signatures asking the EU to stop letting companies switch off games people paid for. That is a lot of people deciding that durable ownership is worth fighting for. On June 16th, the European Commission looked at those 1.3 million signatures and declined to write it into binding law. They called it disproportionate, and pointed at costs and copyright and security concerns. Instead, they floated a voluntary code of conduct, the industry policing itself. But that initiative was only about future games. It wouldn't have saved The Crew. It wouldn't have saved the Kingdom Hearts cloud versions. It was never going to undelete anything. In California, a law came into force this year, Assembly Bill 2426, that goes right at the word. If a storefront wants to sell you a digital game or movie or book, it can no longer just slap the word buy on the button when what you're getting is a license. It has to tell you, plainly, that you're buying a license and not the thing itself. It doesn't stop the shutdowns. It doesn't give you the game back when the servers die. All it does is force the button to stop lying. That's not nothing, because skimpflation of ownership only works while the button gets to keep saying a word it doesn't mean. So that's where we are. 1.3 million people raised their hands in Europe. A regulator in California made the word buy tell the truth. The binding law route in the EU just closed. None of that means the fight is won. It means it moved, from courtrooms and petitions to the label on the button. Now I owe you the practical version, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time proving you own nothing and then just leave you there. The top rung of that spectrum, real ownership, is still reachable. It's just work now instead of a default. If you buy from a DRM-free store, the download is yours, no server required. If you own a disc or a CD, you can rip it, and the file is yours. And the entire world of emulation and preservation exists precisely because people decided old games shouldn't die when a company loses interest. The PlayStation 3 emulator I mentioned earlier can already play roughly 3/4 of that console's library, often looking better than it ever did on the original hardware. I'm not telling you to become a digital prepper. I'm telling you that own it for real is a thing you can still choose, on the things you care about most, and that the choosing is the only part still in your hands. Kingdom Hearts isn't being deleted out of malice. It's being retired the way these things are supposed to go, with a discount, a save transfer, and a real version waiting on the other side. And it still ends with a set of games I paid $90 for sitting on a countdown that runs out next year. And that's the whole point. If the generous and best case version of this still leaves us owning nothing, then buy was never the correct word for any of it. Not for a game, not for a movie, not for a book or an app or anything that lives on a server we don't control. The cartridge in the box, the disc on the shelf, the stuff that made us a promise. Pay once and it's yours as long as the hardware works. We let that promise go without much of a fight, and most of us signed it away in a EULA we scrolled past to hit agree. But 1.3 million people just signed their names to try and get it back, even after they got told no. That's people deciding the thing we lost was worth protecting. So I want to hear from you. What have you bought that you've already lost? A game, a movie, an app that just stopped one day? And where's your own line now between renting something and owning it? Let me know down in the comments. Before I wrap this up, I wanted to give a quick shout out to all my Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you so much for your support. Remember, you too can support my channel and receive early access to my videos. The links to do that are in the description. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.